McArthur was arrested. He has been charged with 6 counts of first-degree murder in relation to the deaths of 6 men: Salim Essen, Andrew Kinsman, Sarush Mahmoodi, Dean Liswick, Majid Kahan, and Skanda Navaratnam. One of the focuses of the investigation has been on human remains found within planters from Mallory Crescent. As I have stated before, these remains are of individuals who have been dismembered. They are in various stages of decomposition, and doctors from Ontario Forensic Pathology Services have been doing some very difficult and time-consuming work in attempting to reconstruct these remains and identify them. I have previously stated that the remains of at least 7 individuals have been located within these planters. The remains of Andrew Kinsman, Sarush Mahmoodi, and Skanda Navaratnam had previously been identified. I can now add that the pathologists have identified the remains of Salim Essen, Dean Liswick, and Abdul Basir Faizi. At least one set of remains has yet to be identified, and the remains of Majid Kayan have not been identified. We now have evidence which leads us to believe that Dean Liswick was killed in April of 2016. Abdul Basir Faizi was 42 years old when he disappeared on December 29, 2010. He had last been seen in the area of Church Street and Wellesley Street in Toronto. His vehicle was recovered on Moore Avenue in Toronto, and his family reported him missing shortly afterwards to the Peel Regional Police Service. Abdul Basir Faizi was one of the 3 men whose disappearances were linked through Project Houston. Today, Mr. McArthur was brought back before the courts. He was charged with first-degree murder in relation to Mr. Faizi. Bruce McArthur is now charged with and alleged to have committed 7 murders. Our investigative team are currently reviewing 15 homicide cold cases from 1975 to 1997. This number is fluid and may increase or decrease. As a result of tips and help from the public, we hope to begin searches of properties associated to Mr. McArthur with our K-9 unit. As of today, our list has grown from 30 properties to 75. We are targeting early May to commence these searches. On March the 5th, we released a photograph of a deceased male who is believed to be a victim of Mr. McArthur. To date, over 500 tips have come in from various sources. From these tips, over 70 potential identities for the unknown male in the photograph have been received. The majority of these potential identities have been eliminated, but we continue to work on 22 of them. Although we are cautiously optimistic about linking one of the remaining 22 to the unknown male in the photograph, I would encourage anyone with any further information or insight whatsoever to please pass that information on to us. The original photograph that we released has been further enhanced by a member of the community, and we are releasing it today. I would like to thank Nikki Ward for her efforts in enhancing the photograph. Nikki is a very well-known member of the LGBTQ community and has used her experience as a graphic artist to enhance the original photograph. We are also releasing a rendition of the victim as drawn by a forensic artist from the Toronto Police Service. This flyer will be available online and will also be distributed around the community. I would like you to keep in mind that it is possible that this victim was not a resident of Toronto, and any additional international coverage of this photograph by the media would be appreciated. I want to thank those who have come forward. If anyone has not heard from us or they have information related to Mr. McArthur, please call us at the Homicide Squad or anonymously through Crime Stoppers. Any questions?
Are you alleging that Faizi knew McArthur before the night he was allegedly killed?
We believe he did, yes.
For how long and what was the nature of the relationship?
That I can't get specific about.
So
Can you just speak again to the cold cases that you're reviewing from 95 through 97?
75 to 97.
Can you speak to those cold cases and why those dates in particular?
Well, those are, we've gone back into the 70s to look for cold cases. We do have a cold case unit here in the Toronto Police Homicide Squad. Stacey Gallant is the detective sergeant in charge of that unit. And we've asked him to go through outstanding cases and any that's maybe linked to the gay village or the gay lifestyle, even in the 70s and 80s and 90s, all the way up to 2010. We'd like to know about it, and we've got a team of investigators reviewing those cases.
And how many did you say there were again, 15?
Right now, we're at 15.
Detective Sergeant, I guess any idea where this might end for you and your team? Is over 10 murders, 20? I mean, do you have any educated guess where this is going with information obviously you know but aren't releasing?
I have no idea. I've said that from day one, and we really don't know how deep this is going to go. I don't want to hazard putting a final number on it. I've said before, we may discover cases from the 70s. We may discover that 2010 was the first murder. We just don't know yet.
Detective Sergeant, having worked on Project Houston, and today for the first time saying that all three of the people who were being investigated are dead and allegedly murdered by Bruce McArthur, do you have any, well, first of all, sense of closure on that part of things, that now all those things are accounted for, but do you see the closure of Houston as a problem? I mean, as something you regret, and something perhaps you might apologize to the gay community for just letting it go? I know it wasn't just you, but it was just let go in April of 2014, and nothing much was done that period until July of 17. Don't you have any feeling about that?
I actually spoke to some of the original investigators from Houston this morning, and they do feel a sense of closure that now all three men have been accounted for. And all I can say about Houston and the efforts by 51 Division in particular, in not just during Houston, but prior to Houston, it was an exhaustive investigation. And the occurrences were never closed in April of 2014. It just merely got to a point where there was nothing left that the investigators could do. And so the task force was disbanded, but those occurrences remained open and remained being followed up on by 51 Division at the time.
There's always things to do. Obviously, in any investigation involving disappearance and likely death, there's always avenues you could have investigators could have looked at. And of course, McArthur had already come up, as we know, and it came up again in attempted murder. They didn't even have the information from Houston, the police who were dealing with it.
Well, I don't believe that's accurate. And I mean, hindsight's always 20/20. You can always go back and look at things that you did do or didn't do. All I can say is that I was familiar with Houston. I've looked back at those occurrences now, and I'm quite content that the job that was done by 51 Division in those days.
The cold cases that you're referring to, are they all in Toronto? Are they the victims who are gay men? I mean, do they fit the profile of what you're looking at now, or is it completely different?
So far, that's exactly what we're looking at, yes.
And how long have you been looking at those cold cases? Have you found any sort of suggestion that there is a connection, or is just due diligence to look at cases that could potentially be connected?
They are cases that potentially could be connected. Right now, we have no evidence to suggest that they are connected to Mr. McArthur.
There's no personal connection between Mr. McArthur and the murder victim.
Sorry?
That means that you have not found a connection.
We have not found a connection yet.
So all these cold cases, I think you just answered it. They were gay men, and we're only making a connection now.
I don't want to get that specific, Rosie, about the lifestyle of the victims or get into the specific cases. Their cases, obviously, the CBC broadcast a story last week detailing, I believe, 7 different cases from the 70s. We're aware of those, and we're looking at those, and the majority of them are of gay men.
There's a gap in the timeline from the alleged murders that you've released from 2012, October 2012 to August 2015. What kind of light can you shed on that gap of several years there where, do we believe there's more victims during that time? Could Mr. McArthur allegedly stop? What were people doing that time?
We don't know that yet.
Your team interviewed Mr. McArthur in 2013. Do you get the sense that his alleged MO may have changed in that time, that he may have changed from cosmology because of that interview?
I'm not commenting, and I haven't commented at all on any past encounters between the police and Mr. McArthur.
In this alleged victim's case, you said there are 22 case people that you're still trying to eliminate.
Correct.
Tell us, how did you come to get rid of this from tips? To whittle it down to 22, what is it about those 22 that keeps them on the list?
Well, some of them are difficult to eliminate. We've got tips to the effect of, I know a fellow named Dave who used to hang out at Dundas and Sherburne, and geez, I haven't seen him for 2 years, and he looks an awful lot like that guy. You know, trying to resolve that tip is very, very difficult. And we've got a few like that we're trying to resolve. May never be able to resolve, but like I said, we've whittled the list down from over 70 to 22 right now.
Why do you need a name for this man to charge him with his alleged murder?
We're not desperate for charges by any stretch. I'd like to put a name to him before we do lay a charge. I'd be able to get a time frame and establish that he is in fact deceased, other than just the photograph.
Do you need that name to lay the charge?
I'd like to have it, yes.
But do you need it? Like, could you technically put John Doe on the information?
Technically, you could, but like I said, I'd like to narrow it down at least with a time frame.
Can you explain, Detective Sergeant, why you think, I know in the past you said that this photo was part of a cache of photos found on his computer. Were there photos of other alleged victims on that computer? Is that why you believe this man is also a victim?
I've never talked about other photos or where this photo came from.
Can you tell us, well, can you tell us now then where that photo came from?
No.
Do you think this man is connected to the remains that have not yet been identified?
That I don't know yet, until I know who this man is.
In terms of identifying Jean Lissawick and Majid Khan and Abdul Basir Faizi, how are they linked to the remains found in Mallory Crescent? Was it dental records, DNA?
It was, we have 3 different mechanisms, which would be fingerprints, dental records, and DNA. We've utilized all 3 of those. I won't get specific about which methods for which victims, but those are the 3 methods we've used.
Just so that we're clear, Hank, how many sets of remains do you have that are not identified now?
1. At least. And let me say that because there was some confusion at the last media conference when I say we have at least 7 sets of remains. I'm not going to be definitive that we only have 7, but we have at least 7.
Theoretically, if you have other remains mixed up in what you have that you haven't identified, and I don't want to be through some of the body part here, body part there that belongs to someone else.
Exactly, and that's what Dr. Palanin talked about last time. This is, like I said, these remains are dismembered. Putting them back together and identifying them and definitively linking one part of the remains to another part. I mean, that's going to rely on DNA and whatnot for some body parts, right?
Detective Sergeant, when you talk about going to 75 properties now, how many of those do you plan to dig at, and how did you get to that number? Was it a better client list that you got a hold of, or was there something more informed that made you think we should add these people or add these properties to our list?
Between client lists and then client lists and tips that have come forward. Also secondhand tips. There's been some people who have been afraid to call in because they don't want the police at their property, and we've gotten the information secondhand. And again, I've said it before, I'd like to assure people that we'll do whatever we can to protect your privacy. If you haven't called in for that reason, please do call in.
And how many do you plan to dig at?
I don't know that yet.
You had a handful a few weeks ago, right? Like 3 or 4 for sure. Is that still the right number, or?
We had 3 properties in particular that I was more interested in than others. One of those we're not quite as interested in right now. And it really depends what the dogs tell us as far as digging goes.
So these are properties where he worked or where you know that there are planters there that Bruce McArthur brought to the property?
Where he's done landscaping, whether it be planters or not.
There's a lot of parkland around where.
Trying to get to you.
There's a lot of parkland around where the vehicle is located for Mr. Faizi, where Mallory Crescent is, and where Mr. McArthur lived. The parkland in and behind that area, is that part of your investigation at all?
We've done quite a few searches already of that parkland, and we will go back and revisit that parkland.
Is it the 75 properties, are some of them public properties or are they all private properties?
Some of them are public as well.
Can you tell us anything about the family's reaction when you identified? Was it surprising to them? Was there relief?
I've been asked that before, and it's essentially the same reaction from the families. They're really not surprised at the end of it. I mean, there's been so much coverage of this. I think they've been expecting it. So it's been somewhat anticlimactic with the notifications.
Can you say where on Moore Avenue this car was found? Like, was it right where it intersects with Mallory Crescent, or closer to Bayview? I mean,
No, it was on. It was west of Bayview.
west of Bayview?
West of Bayview. I believe it's McLennan. Welland or McLennan, between Welland and Bayview there.
But it seems that you've never released how these men have actually died. Are you going to be able to release that at any point in the future?
I think that's going to be released in the court process.
And are the officers still at the Thorncliffe apartment?
We are still at the Thorncliffe apartment. And it's surprising me as well. I keep on predicting when we're going to be finished, but we're still at least 2 or 3 weeks away from finishing that apartment.
What's surprising you, what other stages in that apartment did you not anticipate or foresee with this issue?
We've quite frankly never seen anything like it. I think it's easily set the record for a forensic examination of an apartment. Our guys from Forensic Identification Services are just doing a phenomenal job. They're literally going through that apartment inch by inch by inch. Floors, ceilings, walls, furniture, inside furniture, dresser drawers, literally inch by inch.
Why do you say you haven't seen anything like it?
We have quite a few exhibits out of that apartment. I can't get into specifics about what they are.
Are you saying you've never seen anything like it because of the scope of the evidence that you allegedly found within this small apartment?
A little bit of that, yes.
And a little bit of what else?
A little bit of it's hard to answer because I can't get into specifics about exactly what they've seized or what they've located in that apartment, but it's a long list of exhibits, some items which will be forensically tested by the Center of Forensic Science, others which will not. It's just a very careful, extensive investigation. And these guys have really taken ownership of it, the forensic officers who have been assigned, and done a great job so far.
You've been searching another apartment as well. Is that search concluded, or you return that apartment back to the owner?
Which one, do you know?
Of a partner of Mr. McArthur?
We've returned, the only apartment that we're in right now is Thorncliffe.
In terms of where the car was found, could it have been Welland, Moore Avenue or Welland Avenue?
In that area, yes.
So just between Mount Pleasant and Bayview, is that right?
Is it between Mount Pleasant and Bayview? I believe it's west of,
Lines with Elland as well.
I believe it's west of Bayview.
To be clear, the final remains that you have not yet identified, have you ruled out that they belong to Mr. Kaya?
No.
Okay, so it's still possible. And then the other question that I have is just on the 20 planters that you initially said you were going through, where are you in that process? Have they all been looked at? Have any of them been looked at?
We're done with all the planters, yes.
All the planters have been gone through?
Yes,
And no further remains have been found?
correct.
Have you had any response from Interpol or any international agencies that you reached out to regarding this photo?
We're still following up with some international agencies. As far as this photo goes, I've had nothing come in internationally on as far as tips going with it.
Which agencies did you reach out to?
This is, we haven't specifically sent this out to any international agencies. We're relying on the media to get international coverage right now. I've discussed before, we are in discussions with various international agencies in regards to Mr. McArthur, but not this photograph specifically.
Does that include authorities in the U.S.?
Yes, it does.
Do you have any reason to believe at this point that he might have connections to the American impersonation files?
Not at this point, no.
Detective, with all those old homicides, going back 1975 forward, that predates DNA, you're opening up those cases. Can you comment about the quality of how those investigations look when you're looking back at what you can find? And have you consulted any of the detectives who may still be around who worked on those cases or called them up?
We haven't consulted yet with any of the detectives. I can tell you it's very interesting when you open up a cold case file and you see Detective McCormick or Detective Fantino on the reports. But it's a tough job. Like I said, thankfully we've got Stacey Gallant and his people in the cold case unit who are used to going through cases like that and pulling out what's still left in those cases, and see if we have anything suitable for submission to the Center of Forensic Science.
Because I know that some cold case files have been, because even though it predated, they were good enough to catch some fingerprints off some glass sometime when the technology wasn't there to get it. So there may be some hope in this one that some technology may still open something up.
Yeah, and you mentioned DNA. Obviously, DNA didn't exist in the 70s, but fingerprints as well. Our analysis of fingerprints in the modern day is much better than it was, and fingerprints that weren't necessarily identifiable in the 70s, 80s, even 90s might be identifiable now. So.
Do you know of any period in the 70s to present day where he wasn't living here or was out of the country?
We are constructing a very tight timeline on Mr. McArthur, and we are aware of different areas where he's been and lived. We're still putting that together. So, easy answer to your question is yes. We are aware of different movements.
The planters over Mallory Crescent were not always there. I mean, one of the victims was back in 2010. The planters only showed up around 2015. Do we know where some of these remains may have been prior to them being put in the planters in Mallory Crescent?
No.
How long you've been in the apartment? I just don't remember when you got in. The rest of Mr. McArthur on January 18th. Were you in the apartment right from the back? Because I'm trying to give a length of time that you've been in there.
20th, or I believe we.
So
Yeah.
a couple of days after.
I mean, we were in that apartment to effect the arrest and seize the apartment on the 18th. By the time we got judicial authorization, it was within 24 or 48 hours of that. I don't have a specific memory.
Is he cooperating at all, Detective Sergeants?
That I can't comment on, sorry.
Are you done with Madoff, that property?
That's a good question. I'd like to revisit Madoc when the weather's a bit warmer. No, that's not one of the three I was referring to.
How many officers do you think are working on this case right now? I mean, we're talking, this is month 3 that we're into. Is it getting to be a smaller case, or is it growing?
It's been about the same for the last, I'd say, 6 or 7 weeks. I mean, we got the manpower up to where we needed it to be, and we haven't really added or subtracted any people from the project team. So I'm going to say approximately 20 people working on it full-time right now from an investigative perspective.
Detective, you said you went back to 75. There are some people killed in the gay community in 68, 67. Are you aware of that? And
Yes.
Certainly, almost certainly a serial killer was involved in that. No one's ever been charged. The young men came from out east. The remains, they were buried. They were buried in remote places.
Yeah.
Anyone looking into that, 68?
I'm actually very aware of those cases that you're talking about from 67, 68, and I believe a gentleman was identified as a suspect in relation to those, but never charged with them, right? So, and I believe the description in one of those cases of the suspect was that of a black male.
Detective Sergeant, I'm sure you can sympathize. Days like today are very hard for families who have loved ones who are still missing, who they believe might be involved in this investigation. What, if anything, can you say to those individuals, especially if there is a press conference, what it's like for them, wondering if their loved one's name is going to be released?
Well, and that's exactly why I don't get specific with which cases we're looking at and which cases that we're not. And I've gotten a lot of phone calls and a lot of emails and tips from families of missing persons, and I can assure them that if we do make a link, they'll be the first ones to know. So they won't hear it from me standing up here in front of the media. We'll call them directly first.
When did you expect to identify the last set of remains at this point?
I don't know. It might depend on when we identify this gentleman, if this gentleman is the last set of remains.
Thanks very much, everybody.
But Gayhan's remains have yet to be identified as well, is that correct?
Sorry?
Gayhan's remains, have they been identified?
No.
Thank you. That concludes today's news conference.
uniform.